For to see your face is like seeing the face of God. This is the shocking line coming from the Old Testament scriptures. It is coming from the mouth of patriarch Jacob. It sounds like a blasphemy. Because to see God in the face of other human being is totally unacceptable theological statement. And Jacob was not theologically illiterate. For example, in the conversation that Jesus had with the Samaritan woman at Jacob's well, she even claimed that maybe Jacob is superior in his theological knowledge in relation to Jesus himself. The Samaritan woman said, "Are you greater than our father Jacob?" In addition to that, Jacob was a prophet of God. And after all, he says, "For to see your face is like seeing the face of God." We already know since Immanuel Kant that God belongs to different intelligence. We are human beings. We are beings of time and space. God lives in a state that already St. Augustine called the eternal present. So he belongs to different kind of beings. And then, in spite of all of this, Jacob says, "For to see your face is like seeing the face of God." What did he have in mind when he said something like this? If we look at the text itself, there is something at the very beginning of chapter 33, which says, Jacob looked up, and there was Esau coming with his 400 men. All of you know, or most of you know, the story behind this event that we are discussing this morning. And just for you who are younger, I want to remind you that this very statement, when Jacob looked up and he saw his brother enemy, Esau, coming with 400 soldiers, it was such a sight that caused a huge fear in Jacob. And this event has become the typos, the type symbol of the fear of the people of God. In the eschatological literature of the Old and New Testament, we have different statements which remind us of this event. It has become known as the time of Jacob's distress. For example, I have here Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7. The text says, "For that day is great, there is none like it, and it is the time of Jacob's distress." So this very moment when Jacob looked up and he saw his brother Esau coming with 400 young men, and when somebody comes with 400 men, he means business. There was some unsolved issues between the two brothers in the past. They haven't seen each other for a long time. And finally, this is the moment to solve this problem from their life. And Jacob looked up, and there was Esau coming with 400 men. Jacob knew very well what is going to happen. He knew that probably good part of his family is going to lose their life. So he is going to do some necessary preparations. He divided his family. The text says, he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maidservants. He put the maidservants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. He himself went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times. He was probably hoping, if part of his family is killed, then at least some of them will survive. In spite of all of this, there is this shocking statement: for to see your face is like seeing the face of God. I think these two lines of thought in the Old Testament scriptures are summarized with 5 verbs. 5 verbs. These 5 verbs are found in verse 4, and they are very significant. The text says, the first verb, Esau ran. The second verb, and embraced him. The third verb, he threw his arms around his neck. The fourth verb, and kissed him. And the fifth verb, and they wept. They wept. It is not a rare case in the Old Testament that men weep. Usually, men in the Old Testament weep together. They were not ashamed to weep, but usually they weep together. And when we read this text, which says, and they wept together, it emphasizes the painful and joyful moment at the same time when the two brothers, enemies, met each other after so long time. And this line reminds us of, for example, Genesis chapter 22, when this famous Akedah, or binding, when Abraham was walking with his son Isaac. And there is one sentence which gives the background to the whole description. And this sentence is, and they went together. They went, Abraham and Isaac. I still remember when I was at Andrews long time ago, university, and when we read this passage in Hebrew, only I think 8 of us were in that class. And there was a student from Jamaica, and when he read for the third time this line, and they went together. When you read the text in the Hebrew language, it becomes so painful that he burst into the tears. This is the only time that I remember that in the class, when somebody was reading the Bible, naturally, that pain came out. So we followed him. All of us, we wept. So here we don't have this line, but we have the line, and they wept together. And Esau ran to meet Jacob. He embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck. He kissed him, and they wept together. I believe that these verse 4, these 5 verbs, summarize, explain the sentence that we are going to discuss this morning. And this is the sentence, for to see your face is like seeing the face of God. When Jacob saw his brother enemy, Esau, what did he see? In Hebrew, when we read this in Hebrew, it sounds like, I saw your face. What did Jacob see? First of all, I think he saw his brother whom he hasn't seen for a long time. Probably in the face of his brother, he recognized his own face. He recognized his brother. In the face of Esau, he recognized some of his own characteristics. By saying, I saw your face, he gave human existence to his brother Esau. Yes, you are Esau. I saw your face. Let me just remind you that in Hebrew, the word for face is panim, panim, and it is plural, plural. Probably the word is in plural because it emphasizes the richness of each personality under the sun. As you know very well, there are no two equal faces under the sun. All are unique human beings. And each human being has the plurality of characteristics and attributes. That's why probably the Hebrew word panim, plural, face, speaks about uniqueness of Esau as a unique human being. So when Jacob says, I saw your face, he recognized that in front of him is his brother enemy, but he is a unique human being. There is no such being under the sun. Maybe we can use via negativa now and say, what did Jacob not see when he said, I saw your face? I will just remind you, brothers and sisters, that if ever you go to Auschwitz, for example, in Poland, to the concentration camp, and you look at the faces of these children, 6, 7, 8 years old, the first thing that Nazis did is to take their faces. They are in the concentration camps. There are no faces. There are only numbers there. All of you have seen how kids are not even being able to read their numbers. They are just showing their numbers. Why Nazis have been so enthusiastic about even asking or just telling them, you are not called Peter or John anymore, but you are a number. Because they wanted to tell them that there are no uniqueness of faces anymore. There are no richness of personality of each human being. In the concentration camp, there are no faces. There are only numbers. They are all just nothing. I have been twice in Auschwitz. And the second time when there was some official guide, when I came out of that camp, I wanted to vomit or to commit suicide. The impression was such huge. I would advise every Christian or thinking being, in order to understand the depth of human sin, to go to visit Auschwitz. Because this is not a question only that thousands of people have been killed there. The issue is how they have been killed. It is my conviction that all the demonic forces have been there in action. Let me give you one example. Every day, thousands of these prisoners there, they had to go to the neighboring city to work. They had some wire connected. Some Polish people have been leaving bread along that road. And if any prisoner would just bow down and pick up the bread, he would be killed immediately. But this is not the depth of what struck me. Every day, tens and tens of these prisoners died in that factory. So you can imagine on a daily basis, people coming back from the factory and carrying their dead people. But at the entrance where you see this Arbeit macht frei, at the entrance to Auschwitz, as they are walking, there was an orchestra also made of prisoners playing Wagner, usually. So Wagner is played as tens and tens of dead people. So for me, I see demonic forces just ridiculing the phenomenon of life and everything else. In the concentration camp, no face. You don't have the plurality of your richness of your personality, characteristics. You are only a number in the concentration camp. And in spite of this, Jacob says, I saw your face as the face of God. Or for example, let me give you another example. When the politicians stand in front of the crowd and they say, I love you. Do they really love the people in the crowd? No, they don't. They look at these people as the political objects, as the voters who are going to vote for them tomorrow. No faces. They don't see panim. They don't see plurality, richness of each personality. Or, for example, sometimes if we see somebody who is white or black or yellow, when we see, for example, yellow face, we immediately think that we know everything what is behind that person. We are not ready to see the richness of that person. There are abuses on all different levels of human existence. And Jacob says, for to see your face is like seeing the face of God. This is interesting. This text is at the same time shocking to me and at the same time fascinating. Why? Because it seems, to see the face of God, this is the dream of humanity. All religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, all have as their dream to see the face of God. It seems to human beings that if they can see the face of God, they would break the chains of transitory nature of human existence. They would reach somehow eternity. To see the face of God, this is the goal of all religions. And this is the goal of Christianity too. To see the face of God. This is quite unique experience. But in order to see the face of God, in human history, people have been doing all kinds of things. In order to see the face of God, people have been ready to kill other human beings, to hate other human beings. And I'm not telling you anything new. Most of the wars in this world are religious wars. People are trying to somehow see the face of God. But let's kill other human beings. On the basis of this passage, it seems that if we want to go through this most exciting experience for any human being, to see the face of God, we first have to see the face of our brother enemy. It is a precondition somehow. We have to go through that experience of seeing the face of brother enemy before we see the face of God. Is this in the Bible? Yes, it is. Let me read you the passage that all of you know. This is in the first epistle to John, chapter 4, verse 20. The text says, if anyone says, I love God, yet he hates his brother, he is a liar. For anyone who does not love his brother whom he has, what? Seen, cannot love God whom he has not seen. So it seems it goes from the visible to the invisible. All of you know for crusades, when the Roman Catholic Church in Europe wanted to liberate the Holy Land from Islam. Apparently they wanted to do this for the sake of God. There is a story when the armies of crusaders, they surrounded Constantinople. And they knew that in the Constantinople there were thousands of women and children. And they wrote back to Pope and they said, if we are to take Constantinople, we have to kill thousands of women and children. And the response came from Pope saying, kill all of them. God will recognize his own. In order to see the face of God, people are very often ready to kill, to hate, to be jealous of other human beings. On the other hand, it seems on the basis of these two short sentences Jacob says, I saw your face. For to see your face is like seeing the face of God. It seems that it goes from the visible to the invisible. We first have to see the face of our brother enemy. But let me go one step further and ask the following question. How can we see the face of God in the face of our brother enemy if we haven't seen the face of God before? And here we have the turning in the text itself. Namely, the previous chapter, chapter 32, describes the most fascinating experience that any human being can ever have. Let me just read a few verses and you know some of them. For example, chapter 32, verse 24. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. And then if we read a little bit later, Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Then verse 28, then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel. And verse 30, so Jacob called the place how? How he called that place? Peniel in Hebrew. It is because I saw God's face to face, and yet my life was spared. This is the experience. He called the place Peniel, and it comes from the Hebrew word panim, the face. I have seen God's face to face, and my life was spared. I don't know about you, young people and brothers and sisters, but I didn't go to study theology just to get the job. This is true. I'm 100% honest with you this morning. No, I had many different options in my life. But I lived at that time in Vienna, Austria, and I went through a deep spiritual crisis. I like to say that I had many painful, when you are young, there are many painful experiences. When your girlfriend leaves you, for example. And this is painful for a young person. It is not easy at all. But I can tell you with certainty that the spiritual struggle that I had at that time, the pain that I felt, real physical pain, was greater than any other pain I experienced up to that time. This was the real struggle. I walked from one forest to another. They are called Wienerwald. I still remember the paths that I walked. Is there God? This was the question I was asking myself. I was going to the church, and all these hymns which were sang there and prayers, all these seemed to me strange. To whom are these people singing or praying? But then I think that something happened. I had similar experience that Jacob had. I'm pretty much sure, since I'm in the classroom for more than 35 years now, that you wouldn't be sitting here today had you not seen God at one point in your life. And to see the face of God does not mean we should not understand these words literally. It means to be certain of the presence of God. You wouldn't be sitting today here had God not revealed himself at one point in your life to yourself. You have seen the face of God at one point in your life. And that's why you are singing today. But this is not enough to experience this once forever. This experience is something like the new birth experience, which we have to go over and over again. Jacob says this was a struggle. At the beginning, he did not understand what is going on. Suddenly, he realized that this is a divine being. And he received a new name, Israel. And one of our fine theologians has written in one of his books, Israel does not exist except in the fight. So Israel, that new man, after that night, that new man was the result of that special experience that he has seen the face of God. And let me go one step further and say, regardless of what are your plans in life, regardless of how much money you are going to make, regardless of what position you will have in your life, the most precious and the most valuable experience that you can ever have in this earthly life is to experience the presence of God in your life, to see the face of God. And I would like to challenge you this morning to look for God. He is a beggar of love. He reveals himself to every human being. He is searching for, he is looking for us. It is up to us to answer for his search. For to see your face, says Jacob, is like seeing the face of God. And there is one more, maybe still the text is puzzling us a little bit. But then when we come to the last sentence of verse 10, it says, now that you have received me favorably. This word received is the Hebrew word ratzah, ratzah. And ratzah is a technical word used in the Old Testament sacrificial system. When the believer would bring his sacrifice, and he would offer the sacrifice on the altar in the sanctuary, God would ratzah. He would accept. He would forgive. He would embrace the believer, as God was doing throughout the Old Testament sacrificial system. This is what Esau did this time to Jacob. And Esau is the father of the enemies of God, Edomites, Ammonites, the world's enemies. Esau himself was not always doing God's will. He is the brother enemy. But at this moment of his life, he acted like God in the parable of the prodigal son. Listen one more time to these words. Esau ran, and he embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. So Esau ratzah. He forgave his brother. He embraced him and he kissed him. I think if we look at the world today, and we are always supposed to see what is going on around us. Let me use Charles Dickens. Dickens was describing London. And then he says something like this. He says, the fog is down the river. The fog is up the river. The fog is on the big boats. The fog is also on the small boats. The fog is on the hills, and the fog is in the valleys. Young people, if you look at the world today, fog is everywhere. Fog is in the political spheres of our society. Fog is sometimes in the church too. Wherever you look, down the river or up the river, almost no light, dark fog. But let me remind you, as you look at the political developments, Don't ever be fooled that any solution for human drama will come from these Brexit or some other wars in the world. Nothing great is going to change. Human beings are going to remain mortal human beings. There is just one solution for humanity, and this solution comes from seeing the face of God. David in Psalm 27, the great poet of Israel, said, "There is only one thing that I ask from the Lord, only one thing, and that is that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life." And he gives the reason why he wants to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of his life. He says, in order to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord. A little bit later in Psalm 27, he says, "Don't hide your face from me. I am seeking your face." I am firmly convinced that to see the face of God, to experience the real presence of God in our lives, this is the most precious experience that any human being can ever experience. Leo Tolstoy, in his greatest novel, for some people it is the greatest novel which ever was written. It is interesting, just since we are Adventists here, that Leo Tolstoy traveled to Battle Creek, for example. He met with John Kellogg. I've seen this picture several times in that military. The American Army is today in Battle Creek in our former hospital. And there is the picture of Leo Tolstoy with Kellogg. Nobody has done the research why he traveled to Battle Creek to meet with Kellogg. But this is interesting that he is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, writer of all time. And he has many Protestant views, although he lived in the Orthodox world. He was excommunicated from the Orthodox, Russian Orthodox Church. And he was helping people who have been reading the Bible. He himself loved the Bible, especially Jesus. And Leo Tolstoy wrote, it took him, I think, 7-8 years to write The War and Peace. And one of the key characters in The War of Peace is a young girl, Natasha Rostova. And Natasha Rostova, when you read this passage about this young girl, beautiful girl, her family is nobility in Russian society. She is pretty. She runs on these steps, Russian steps, and she's picking up the flowers. She's happy. She's expecting everything from life. She hopes that in front of her is just a beautiful life. And after all of this, she fell in love with a handsome young man, Andrei Bolkonsky. But he is a military guy. He also comes from the nobility. But he is different than Natasha. She loves him with all her heart. She is ready to get married to him immediately, to have children, to have a nice home. On the other hand, Andrei, he is thinking about his military career. Although they were engaged, Andrei tells her, "Please give me 1 year. I have to go to the Polish border," because this was the war of Russia with Napoleon. But behind that was something else. His father, but also his passion for career. Career is much more important than even his girlfriend that he's engaged to. Natasha is still hoping. She agrees that she goes to the Polish border there. But as the time is passing by, he is not writing on a regular basis. Suddenly, she realizes that she fell in love with another man. She goes with him. His name is Kuragin. And she breaks the engagement. Suddenly, when she did that, She realizes what she did after some time. After some initial love and sex and all of this, suddenly everything has changed. She fell into deep depression. Life does not exist for Natasha Rostova anymore. There is no this girl who is running outside, picking flowers, singing, looking at the sun, at the birds. This is the girl who is attached to her house now, and she wants to commit suicide. I'm just summarizing the whole descriptions, long pages of Tolstoy, where he describes her inner being, what was going on. And she's ready to die. She's pale. She's not eating. The days are passing by. But suddenly, after some long period of time, something has changed. Something has changed. Of course, she was able, you can read this between the lines, that she has seen the face of God. And it happened also to Andrei Bolkonsky, as he is lying on the battlefield, wounded. The blood is running of his body. But in that battle, for the first time, he looks at the sky and he sees that eternally blue sky. And just to make the long story short, Natasha is coming back from that depression. She even meets Andrei Bolkonsky when he's coming wounded from the battlefield. She helps him. He died after 2 months. But she found another man and she remarried. Some critics have objected to Tolstoy's how somebody can touch the very bottom of human existence. And suddenly she's still very well, she's having children, and so on and so on. For some people, it is impossible. It is impossible if there is no that experience with God. I think, our civilization today, we live in the time of a lot of noise. I would advise you, brothers and sisters, young people, take sometimes time and go listen to the wind, how the wind blows. Listen to the wind. Listen to the silence sometime. And try to go through this experience to see the face of God. I'm speaking from my own experience and from the experience of many people who have described that experience. This is the experience of human life. There is nothing more important. And look for that experience and love the truth, God's truth. Fight for the truth. Live for the truth of God. And sing the truth of God. And God will bless you. And of course, once we see the face of God, we have hope. And hope is the most valuable word in human existence. May God bless all of us today and His word in our hearts. Amen.